This evening's session with Rabbi Donniel Hartman, the president of the Shalom Hartman Institute in Jerusalem, and Rabbi Gilah Dror, president of the Rabbinical Assembly. Tonight's dialogue will be moderated by Debra and Kamin, our colleague, Rabbi of Am Yisrael Congregation in Chicago, secretary of the Rabbinical Assembly and fellow at the Shalom Hartman Institute and its prestigious Rabbinic Leadership Initiative. We are indeed fortunate to have two wonderful speakers tonight. Rabbi Gilah Dror, the president of the RA. She received her ordination from JTS in 1990 and is the rabbi of Rodef Shalom Temple in Hampton, Virginia. She also served as rabbi for 10 years at Eshel Avraham in Beersheba, Israel, where she was one of the trailblazers of the Masorti movement in Israel. As the first female president of the Rabbinical Assembly, she has led the Rabbinical Assembly. She has led the Rabbinical Assembly with wisdom and served the conservative movement with distinction, represented us all over the globe. Rabbi Donniel Hartman is the president of the Shalom Hartman Institute and director of the Engaging Israel Project. He holds a doctorate from Jewish philosophy from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, a Master of Arts in Political Philosophy from New York University, a Master of Arts in Religion from Temple University, and Rabbinic Ordination from the Shalom Hartman Institute. He's the author of several volumes and founder of some of the most extensive education of training and enrichment programs for scholars and educators and rabbis in Israel and North America. Under his leadership, the Shalom Hartman Institute continues to be a major force for pluralism and creative transformation of Jewish life within Israel and North America. For those of us who are privileged to call him friend, a colleague, and above all teacher, and I count myself among that group, we have been blessed by his passion for the Jewish people, his love for the state of Israel, and his innovative, probing, and insightful teaching of Torah. Tonight we will explore the very vital relationship between Israel and North American Jews, the role of the rabbinate in formulating a new and engaging conversation with the American Jewish community in Israel. We will answer questions such as how do we approach the differing and at times cacophonous voices which abound in the Jewish community regarding Israel and still maintain the ideal of Am Echad B'Lev Echad. How do we respond to the challenges of our generation? And so without further ado, I call forward now for his very first appearance at a Rabbinical Assembly convention, tonight's first speaker, my friend and my teacher, Donniel Hartman.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here. Even though part of what I'm going to be speaking about this evening is not as joyful and as pleasant as I would like it to be. Why should you care? Why should you care about the state of Israel? I'm not talking about why the Jewish community in general should care. And I'm not talking about the differences between the various age groups and how do we make Israel relevant to younger generations and all the issues that we know and we struggle with on a regular basis. Why should you care? And unless you have an articulated philosophy, an approach to the place of Israel in your heart, you can't fake it. Unless you know why you care, and it's possible that you will care for a different reason than your community. It's possible that there's going to be something that you don't know how to communicate, but at least first and foremost you know why it is that you care. The issue of how we sell it, how we market it, how do we reach the unreachables, etc., etc., etc. All of those are questions that we have to be bothered by. But first and foremost, do we know why we care? And we know it's not simple. See, I live in Israel. It's my home. I love being there. But it is my home. And as such, the fact that I live there and made it my home makes caring a little more self-evident. But let's be truthful and honest. It's not so clear why you should care. Official Israel doesn't respect you. Official Israel doesn't recognize you. And they don't respect me or recognize me either, so misery enjoys company. June 6th, I'm marrying my son. Mazel tov, thank you. Someone has to sign for me. So I know your pain. Why don't you walk away? Why don't you tell Israel, give me a call? It would be understandable. Not only does official Israel not recognize you, Israel itself doesn't really see you. They don't fully understand you. They don't fully respect the Judaism that you've created. And deep-seated in the Zionist narrative is a belief that we really shouldn't be here today. We're a mistake, an anomaly in many ways. Zionism was to create a new Jew, and in a deep sense, a new Jewish identity. An identity grounded on power, activism, creativity, culture. One which should make your life pale and leave you with one of two choices. Either to make aliyah to Israel, and the term is very interesting. And by the way, even this place doesn't exist. Do you know where we are today? You think we're in Atlanta. We're not in Atlanta. And you think you all belong to different communities. You all live in one place from the perspective of the Hebrew language. Do you know where that place is? Chutz La'aretz. It's like if you're not there, you're like nowhere. You're nowhere. And as people who live nowhere, you should be coming to the new Jewish identity which was supposed to create something exciting and new and vibrant. And if you didn't, you were either going to assimilate or you were going to be subject to the perpetual anti-Semitic response of the world as befitting a pathetic Jewish community. If you're dying, we love you. And we love helping you when you're dying because it reaffirms how central we are. So, why, if this is the story, why don't you walk away? And I promise you, most of you have thought about it. And when the Jewish community in North America is struggling with a relationship, one of the goals of an assembly of rabbis is to forget about our community for a while. This is the place where you have to nurture yourself. This is where you get to be honest, where you get to struggle, where you get to talk, and you don't have to worry about the repercussions. So why do you care? In our community, there has surfaced over the last decades two primary causes, two primary sources to justify your care. The first, marketed by Israel and consumed by world Jewry. The reason why you should care is because this new Israel is the only solution for the Jewish problem, for the Jewish condition. It's the only place where Jews could be safe. And if you think you're safe, what's the rejoinder? Thank you very much. We didn't coordinate this, but it's perfect. And you know it to be true. If you think you're safe, well, the Germans thought they were safe too. Why should you care? Because you never know. Caring is an insurance policy. Caring is creating a place where you could go to when things get bad here. And we could rally around that cause. And we could rally around the potential that fear, which is sitting there in the corner just waiting to come out. I care because I need a port, and Israel has 2 of them. And that worked for a while. But then a major tragedy happened in Jewish life to you. You're not hated enough. This place which shouldn't have existed is thriving. And telling you to care about Israel because you never know is increasingly insignificant. Maybe you are deluding yourself, but you're deluding yourself. So you should care because Israel is your safety net? Selling less and less. A little less compelling. It's a little less compelling to you. Because you know better. Well, there's another foundation for caring. If Israel is not your safety net, then lo and behold, you should care because you're Israel's safety net. If you're not in danger, well, Israel's in danger. If the old story had Israel at the front line fighting for Jewish survival, now you're on the front line fighting for Jewish survival. I recently met a woman who had come back from AIPAC conference. I felt I was speaking to a commando who had recently returned from Entebbe. I promise. And I'm not saying anything I'm just talking about her. She was so filled with herself, there was no room in the room. We spent 3 or 4, we dealt with Iran. I thought she was one of the pilots. Like I remember, Why? Because the front line on Iran is not in Jerusalem, it's in Washington. And who has weight in Washington? You do. So you care because now you don't need to have an inferiority complex towards the Israeli soldier. You don't have to kiss the pilot anymore. They should kiss you. We need to start sending missions of Israeli Jews to America to see the Jews on the front line. Either way, variations of either of those two, and very often a combination of both, are the primary reasons we give to ourselves why we should care. And there's something very convenient about both of them. They make the reality of Israel irrelevant to my care and impervious to my frustration and my ideological discomfort. Because when Jews are in danger, whether it's Jews here in North America or whether it's Jews in Israel, all the issues that we care about Jewishly, that's tomorrow's conversation. We could at least continue to care today. What about? Shh, not now. Hitler didn't distinguish between secular, conservative, and reform, and so it's not our responsibility to talk about this today because we are living in the midst of a perennial death narrative which requires of us to transcend what we care about, to transcend our so-called selfish ideologies. Put them aside for now. Now is not the time. Shh. And we could keep on walking. And inside, as we walk, a little part of us continues to die. But the structure is safe. We're still one. But we're dying. And sometimes I wonder if one of the great dangers we face is if Ahmadinejad would be replaced. And what would happen if sanctions work? Where would we be? What would be the next death narrative that we sell? What's the next story that we tell ourselves to quiet our conscience and to enable ourselves to still go to sleep at night? Is there another reason to care? Do we need Ahmadinejad? Do we need to believe that either we are dying or Israel's dying for us to be a united Jewish people? It's a sad reality. Because in reality, what it's requiring of all of us is neither to see ourselves nor to see the living reality of Israel. Why do I care? I care because as a Jew and as a rabbi, I believe that my primary responsibility is to fight mediocrity. That to be a Jew is to aspire for excellence. And I use all my strength, and you use all of your strength to combat and deal with assimilation and mediocrity every single day in your shuls. And you never give in. Well, that same battle we have when it comes to the state of Israel. Israel is a religiously mediocre place. It's a place of profound assimilation. And even if that assimilation is not leading to people leaving, it's an assimilation which is undermining the greatest values and ideals and ideas of our people. I care because I want to fight to change the state of Israel. I care because no matter how many times it insults me, I refuse to give up. I care because what it means to be a rabbi is to look at the Jewish people and not to idealize them, nor to walk away from them. I believe that you should care, not because Israel's dying, but because there's a living Israel that you want to shape. I care because there's 13.5 million Jews in the world. 6 million in North America and 6 million in Israel. And if we don't know how to live with each other, there is no more Jewish people. This people who've walked for thousands of years together were this close to changing that history. Not because of an external crisis, because of our own. I care because there's something potentially remarkable about Israel. There's something remarkable about the opportunity to build a Judaism which shapes a public sphere. There's something remarkable about seeing which Jewish values could leave a private sector and influence the totality of a society where we are responsible. And part of my problem is that when we're responsible, when Jewish values come into this sphere, sometimes it stinks. Sometimes the Judaism that I want to bring into the public sphere is not the Judaism that someone else wants to. And sometimes the Judaism that they want to, or most of the time the Judaism that they want to, is not even the Judaism that I recognize. Very often it's a Judaism that I left behind. But there's that potential to win. There's those moments, like Gilad Shalit, when you see Jewish values leaping out of the Siddur, leaping out of the Chumash, and making a society, or guiding a society, to make a decision on the basis of its reading of Jewish values. All of a sudden, he who saves one life as if they've saved the whole world is not just a piece of art. Call him Etzil Nefesh Echad. It's like a nice idea. But the idea that we Jews don't count, when it comes, I don't count. If one is infinite, then 1 versus 100, we're still dealing with infinite. And we'll take a chance on that. When it comes to healthcare, when it comes to social justice, there's an opportunity for us to build our own community and to see whether Torah is in fact eternal, whether it earns that right to continue to guide us in the future. I care about Israel because I refuse to allow it to fail. I care about Israel because if we walk away, we ourselves will have destroyed the Jewish people. I care about Israel because there is an experiment going on there which has the possibility of transforming the meaning of Jewish life for Jews all over the world. I don't need Israel to die in order to care. It's the way Israel might live. It's the Israel that may be which could inspire me. What does it demand of you? I know that many of the things that I just mentioned are difficult to communicate. To Jews who don't care a lot about Judaism, it's hard to speak about the potential of Israel to revitalize a new Judaism. For Jews for whom Jewish peoplehood is increasingly insignificant, it's hard to argue that if you walk away from Israel, Jewish peoplehood will come to an end. First and foremost, what it requires of you, whether it's the reasons I gave or reasons that you have, to find what it is that excites you. We'll get it to trickle down. We'll find a way to talk about it. You are bigger as people and as thinkers and as Jews. You're bigger and you don't need the death narrative. It requires of you to connect to the deepest parts of your soul. It requires of you to give up the temptation of being able to join your community in the midst of their mediocrity under the guise of involvement so that you can lead them nowhere. It requires of you to find ways to take these ideas and to speak about them in small dosages. Somebody who is an addict on the death narrative cannot be freed from it overnight. You know it very well. You will be fired if you try to. You will be fired if you walk too far out in front of the camp. V'nishmartem ma'od lenafshotechem applies to your salaries. I'm not asking you to walk too far out. I'm asking you to take one step. I'm asking you from time to time, remind people, as my father taught me and said in the 70s, Israel's too important to leave to the Israelis. He said it in the 70s. Remind them that there is something exciting that may be created there. That there are other issues besides who is a Jew that could get them to be involved. Remind them that to be a Jew means to fight. Remind them that if they fight for it, they become part of a new process. Your responsibility is also to be a leading force to move the conversation about Israel away from its bifurcating nature today. And I know your congregation wants you to hire the various pit bulls. What are they called? Pit bulls. They want you to hire them so that they could have somebody coming into their shul telling them everything that they know and massaging them and accusing them of not getting it, of being enemies. And if you bring that pit bull in, oh, our rabbi is great. Don't allow that conversation. Because if we're going to have a Jewish values conversation about Israel, if we're going to expand beyond the death narrative, we have to create a safe space for Jews to talk about it together. So stop that. And finally, and with this I'll conclude, don't give up yourselves. Don't despair. Remember one small fact. And it's a strange fact, and it's one that it's easy to forget. There is not a single great initiative that has occurred in 60-something years of Israel's survival which hasn't either started or been supported or been founded or built in partnership with you. You're not just carriers of a movement, of a particular ideology. The question is not simply whether there will be a greater and stronger conservative Judaism in Israel. You're not one issue people. It's filmed. There's, what could I tell you? The voice comes forth from heaven, and don't you dare say it's not in heaven. Don't be a one-issue people. I'm with you. I know that Israel will only grow Jewishly to the extent that there's a stronger conservative, reform, and liberal Judaism, but it's not there. It's not there. And if that's the only test of how you shape the values of Israel, you've become small. You are members of a denomination because you feel that that denomination is a way to bring Torah alive and to bring the Jewish people alive. Your love is for your denomination. Your love is for your people. Your love is for your Torah. The denomination is not an end, it's a means. There's something bigger. And Israel can be, or needs you, to see it as such in order for you not to give up. For many years, the Jewish people were defined by Torah. And as we were defined by Torah, that definition of Torah was supported by good, vibrant enemies from the outside. Today, we are a community which is neither defined by Torah nor benefiting from good, powerful enemies. We have to find a way back to that Torah. A Torah both in our lives here and a Torah which grounds and builds a new Israel. We need each other to build that Judaism. And we need you to continue to care. And if you care, then our community will care. Find that strength in your heart. A strength that requires you, in a certain sense, to be alone. To be alone in your studies. To know what it is that's important to you. And then go outside and create a community which cares. And it will take time. And it will be a lonely task. But it's an important task. 2 Jewish people, 6 million in Israel, 6 million in North America, are dependent on your care. And I hope you will do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Donniel. Now we call forward our esteemed president, Gilah Dror.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, and, or yes, but, or a combination of both. I would like to approach this topic from a little bit a different perspective, and I know that dinner is awaiting us, so I will try to be brief. But I do have some things to say. I would like to dig a little deeper into this topic, into the question of why the Israel conversation is so difficult in the United States, more difficult now than it was a couple of decades ago, 20 years ago, more difficult, and why it's so worthwhile. I want to touch on some research about the Israel conversation in the United States. I want to remind us that we're an international RA, so this conversation applies also to members of our community that live in other regions, in other areas, who have to think about the relationship of Israel to wherever they live, because they're important as well, and I'd like to hear back from them as well. And the third thing I'd like to do is some suggestions for us as Masorti conservative rabbis. So as rabbis, we have the Israel conversation with so many different audiences. That's the reality. We speak amongst ourselves, and we speak with lay people. We speak with congregants, we speak with Christian clergy, with imams, with Jews and with non-Jews. There are so many different audiences and conversations going on. It is not one conversation, and that's part of our reality. It is multiple conversations with multiple audiences. And this makes it so hard for us to fashion an Israel message. Some Jews and some non-Jews are pro-Israel. Some are anti. Some are anti with an explanation. Some are pro with reservations. Some are informed. Some are misinformed. There's a premise. My premise is that the Israel conversation has changed radically. There's lots of hostility and tension evident. Some of us fear to speak in all sorts of circles because we're not sure of the audience and what the reaction will be. And when we speak amongst ourselves as rabbis, there's often a disconnect and a lot of frustration. So I ask myself, what has changed to cause the Israel conversation to be so much more complex and difficult than it used to be? And I think that 3 things have changed that make this conversation more difficult. First of all, Israel has changed tremendously. She is not what she used to be. I remember I was born in Israel. I remember what it was like in the early 50s in Israel. I remember running out of the school because there was an alarm and getting into this bunker. What was the bunker? It was a little hole in the ground with a piece of tin over it. And you crawled into it and you sat there while you heard the planes above. And I remember as a young first grader in Israel being in that situation and saying, where is my brother? Where is my mother? Where is my family? How are they okay? I remember that. Today, I am the mother of 2 children who live in Israel. I brought up 3 children in Israel. And one of my children is a career Army officer who's been in the Army for over 13 years, I think. And one works in high tech in Israel. I'm familiar with Israel. I think the feather in my cap is not that I was the first woman president of the International Rabbinical Assembly. The feather in my cap is that I was the first woman president of the Israel Rabbinical Assembly. Israel has changed dramatically politically, militarily, economically, culturally, and socially. And you know what? So much change all at once is confusing. That's why we have a hard time knowing how to speak about Israel. Some of the changes are amazingly wonderful. We have so much to be thankful for, and some of them are less heartening. And because we care so much, we're frustrated by some of what is happening. But we should never lose sight of the fact that Israel is a work in progress, an amazing work in progress, and we are part of the team that is crafting this work in progress. What we do can and does affect not only the present, but the future of Israel. And what we say can and does affect not only the present, but also the future of Israel. For conservative Masorti people and rabbis, this can be a bit challenging. I like to tell you a little story that I told to some of you about this past Rosh Hashanah. I was in Hampton, Virginia, and we have all the time, we have 2 Israeli families from very high-ranking military personalities who come with their families for 2-year stints to be part of this exchange program with other nations and military people. Well, the past 2 years, one of those 2 families was the family of Colonel Aviv Reshef. And I knew him just a little bit because we always invite them to join the synagogue if they want to. You know, we complimentary, come when you want. Some do, some don't. They did for a little bit and then they disappeared. Rosh Hashanah, I'm giving my, giving my sermon at Hampton, Virginia, and I see Colonel Reshef comes in with his wife and 3 children. She too, by the way, was in the Army for many years, his wife. They come in and there's some more family members or guests, I don't know who it is, and they're sitting there, and after a while I noticed that they've left. And I said, didn't speak to them. What can you do? And I didn't think about it anymore because that's the way it is sometimes. Some of the congregants weren't there at the end either. So okay. I suggested that we invite Colonel Reshef to speak to at our shul just recently. And he agreed to come and speak to us about Israel. And I came a little late, a little after the program started, but he wasn't speaking yet, and they had saved me a seat at the table that he was sitting at. And I noticed that he was looking for me, and he was like, oh, good, she's here. And I wondered why, why? Because I didn't think that our kind of Judaism spoke to them. So he got up and he started to speak, and he said, I want to tell you something about myself before I tell you about Israel. I'm so moved when I think about it to this. I'm so moved by this story. He said, I want to tell you that this past Rosh Hashanah, my father, who had passed away in December of this year, my father, who was very ill and was a general in the Israeli army, came to visit me in Hampton, and I brought him to Rodef Shalom Temple, to your temple. And he listened to your rabbi's sermon. And And he opened your Machzor Lev Shalem. And he prayed. And we left. And he said to me, this is the Judaism that we are fighting for. Later, Colonel Reshev told me that his father was a Holocaust survivor who came from an Orthodox background, and I knew that there was a lot of learning in that family. And he told me that he bought him Machzor Lev Shalem from our gift shop afterwards to give to his father in the last few months of his life, because this was so meaningful to him, because he found a Judaism that was what he was looking for all of these years. He had to come to Hampton, Virginia, in order to find it, but he did. And I felt like I did something so important in that moment. Yes, we, specifically the conservative Masorti movement, have much to contribute to the crafting of Israel as a modern, democratic Jewish state, as Israel continues to become what she can be for all of us, for all the world as a Jewish state. Yet in Israel, until we established Menucha Nechona Cemetery in Beersheba, I was not able to officiate at funerals of my own congregants. Today, thanks to our collective efforts, I could if I were there. And as a matter of fact, I just got an email this morning that the second president of Menucha Nechona, Pinchas Vardin, passed away. Some of you know Pinchas Vardin. My mother was the first president of Menucha Nechona in Beersheba. Pinchas Vardin took it over and really made it the cemetery that it is, and his funeral will be tomorrow in Menucha Nechona of Beersheba. Israel is a work in progress. Some of us live in Israel and contribute to her future that way. Some of us live outside Israel, and we too are a part of her future. It is worth our while to discuss the Israel conversation because in our day and age, Israel is so central to who we are as Jews, and I do not think that it is only because Jewish values can be fully played out in Israel. I think that we believe that Jewish values can guide us here and have guided Jews wherever they are around the whole world, but I tell you there's something special about Israel. Israel is central, and maybe I'm more of a mystic. Maybe that's what it is. Israel is so central to us, even though we can use our values wherever we are. Yes, sovereignty is different and gives another opportunity, but it's not the only way to use Jewish values. In the 11 years that I've been in Hampton, I've taken my congregation, which is a small congregation, I've taken a trip to Israel 3 times. And as a matter of fact, yesterday my president said to me, okay, you're coming back at the end of the week, you won't be the president of the Israel RA, time to plan our next trip. Because I took them 2 weeks before I took the presidency of the RA to Israel, and I said to them, 2 years of presidency, I'm not going to deal with this. 1 year to plan it, 3 years from now we're going to do a trip. He said it. He said, come back, start working on it. On one of my congregational trips to Israel, one of my congregants said to me, Rabbi, you're different in Israel. And then she shared with me later that she too felt different in Israel. Does she know about the deficiencies of Israel and in regard to our movement? She knows more than most. Yet Israel is special, and she looks to her rabbi for guidance on how to interface with Israel. Our conversations are important, so I welcome the opportunity to look at some of the difficulties and face them, along with some of the rewards. Our conversations in the United States are important not only with Jews, but with non-Jews, and I want to touch on that as well. So the first thing that has changed is Israel. Israel has changed tremendously. The second thing that has changed, people's reality has changed tremendously. Technology has changed the way we handle our relationships. If you've noticed, Your relationship with your family has changed in these decades because of technology. I have congregants who do an internet seder with relatives who live, far away from them. They do an internet seder with family. I mean, once upon a time, you went somewhere and you were hardly in touch with your family if you moved away. Today, that's not so. Relationships are different. And the same difference happens in relationship with Israel. We may be far away from Israel, but we're more connected than we ever were. We go back and forth much more, and we talk on Skype much more, and we have communication much more, and that makes a difference. But technology is tricky because it's not the same. You still want to go visit your family. You still want to go visit Israel because you know something differently when you're up close physically in the area. So that's a change. And the third change is, the fact is that as rabbis, we basically cannot have private conversations in our world. Just earlier, you saw someone was speaking, said, who's live streaming, who's listening? It's very, very hard to have a private conversation. We live in a world of sound bites. That's the reality. But you know what? Torah has a greater depth and requires more than just sound bites. Sound bites are good, but they're not enough. And sometimes we have to tailor our speech. Chanoch lanar al pi darko. We have to speak the language that a particular audience will understand and will connect to. And we have to say something. If I want to speak to someone who has no knowledge of Israel, that's one conversation. If I want to speak to someone who has an intimate knowledge of Israel, that's a different conversation. And yet everything that we say, we have to be aware it's going to be on the internet tomorrow. Everyone is going to hear everything that I say. And so as a result, some of us are afraid to speak. But I think we must speak, and our words must be measured far more than ever before, lest we say something that can cause more harm than good. We have to know how to speak. And I want to speak very briefly about research on the Israel conversation. We all know that we talk to people who are very passionate about Israel, and they don't bother me with facts. I love Israel, I support Israel. We all know that there are people who are just the opposite. Israel's terrible, it's terrible, I can't think of it, nothing good, can't say anything good about Israel without bringing some negative comment back. But you know what? There are a lot of people who are completely disinterested in Israel in the United States. As a matter of fact, research has shown that 70% of young Americans, 70%, are really completely misinformed about Israel. And this is particularly among the Hispanics, blacks, young, a large population of young people who think that Israel is a very radical place, religious place, an ultra-radical religious place, and they think that they share no values with Israel. They don't know the reality about Israel. And so if they're supporting of Israel, and we know that there's a large percentage of support for Israel, it's not based on reality. It's not based on real knowledge of Israel. And so it's dangerous because if they don't really know Israel, someone's going to, tell them, or they're going to see or they're going to show, and then what's going to happen? We need to be educating people about what Israel is, and that comes before advocacy. Education. When we speak, we have to educate. I will tell you about a Christian group that I was speaking with on a regular basis, studying with on a regular basis. I was the rabbi who came to this Christian group for 2 years, and then Operation Cast Lead broke out, and I had a wonderful relationship with them. I went to the movies with them. I studied with them every other week. It was great. But Operation Cast Lead came about, and we'd never spoken about Israel. We spoke about their Torah. We spoke about my Torah. We spoke about movies, but we didn't speak about Israel. Well, when Operation Cast Lead started, I went there and they were talking about what was going on, and I could feel the negative vibrations. And these are clergy, Christian clergy, that influence many people when they speak. And I sat there and they looked at me all of a sudden and they said, "What's the matter?" Because they knew me. They knew me. They could tell something was wrong. "What's the matter?" And I said to them, you know, my perspective is different than yours. And they said to me, how is it different? What is different? And because I had built up a relationship with them, they wanted to know. And what I did was I began by expressing the pain that it takes for us to have to inflict pain in order to protect ourselves. And the fact that I know that people care, that Israelis care very much, but they're also fighting for their lives. And I spoke with them, and at the end of, and they didn't study their Torah those 2 hours. They listened and they asked questions, and they listened and they asked questions. And at the end of the 2 hours, you know what they said to me? Where can we get more information? We don't know anything about Israel. Where can we get, and I thought that was really good. Where can we get more information? So, we have to, in short, when we deal with people who want, and we want them to engage with Judaism, we don't frontally go out and say to them, you have to come to shul and be Jewish because it's good for you, right? We try to engage them, you know, we try to introduce them to people that they like. We try to invite them to one little program. Taste this, maybe you'll come back. Same thing with Israel. We have to broaden the base of knowledge through windows of interest, things that interest them. We should introduce them to people who have similar values and interests in Israel so that they know what Israel and Israelis are about. We have to humanize the story, and we have to make it relevant to them. I have some suggestions. I'm shortening what I had to say. Suggestions for us as Masorti conservative rabbis. Let's work together to build better Israel conversations among ourselves, and I agree with that. We have to work hard to build better conversations among ourselves and with others. Let's remember that there are all kinds of giving to help create and fashion Israel. In Israel, people give by serving years in the army, if they're able to, and in the reserves, and by contributing to Israeli society in so many ways. Our colleagues in Israel serve by giving spiritual space to people who best serve God, Torah, and community in conservative Masorti settings. Let's focus our special contribution to Israel as conservative Masorti rabbis. Let's make that our focus. If we get frustrated at times, believe me, I got frustrated at times. If we get frustrated at times, let's remember that it's a process, and Israel is a work in progress. Our own movement did not ordain women rabbis in 1990 when I was ordained. Our own movement in Israel did not ordain women rabbis in 1990 when I was ordained. I was in Israel. We did not at the time. Now we do. So let's remember that it's a process. Let's remember that there's tremendous progress in so many areas, and let's see ourselves as uniquely privileged to bring the light of Masorti Judaism to Israel. And I'm ending now, but I'd like to end, with your permission, with a blessing for all of us. And it's not in Hebrew. It's in English. You can use it in many places. May we all seem a little different when we see ourselves in the true light of Israel and in the light of what we know Israel can yet become. And may we be privileged to see Israel and our Masorti colleagues in Israel thrive in the years to come. Thank you.
All right, it's time for dinner, yeah? Do we have time for any? I don't know if we have time for questions, and I feel a little selfish because I get to study at Hartman in the summer and in the winter, so I hate, but I'm going to ask a question anyways. Donniel, I have a question for you down there. Is there still a role for advocacy, or is that an idea whose time has passed?
There is a role for me as long as it's only part of the conversation. It's when you believe that advocacy is the whole conversation that you're basically talking without a foundation. Most of the time, people don't build their positions on the basis of facts. They choose the facts that resonate with their position. And very often, much of advocacy is a conversation to those people who are already convinced about the facts that they want to hear. And you very, very rarely are able to shift opinions on the basis of advocacy. And so if the conversation about Israel is a self-conversation, it's a conversation in which you want to reaffirm who you are amongst those who are already committed, then you engage in advocacy. And there's a great paradox. People actually speak about advocacy as a vehicle to reach those who are unaffiliated. I've never seen it. I've never seen one single individual change their opinions about Israel because of a fact. Never saw it. I've been doing it, I have to tell you, I've been traveling around the United States and I speak about Israel probably more than almost any other individual in the world. I have yet to see one individual getting up and saying, "Oh, I didn't know that fact. I see it, I believe." It just doesn't happen. By the way, and if you want to know something, people don't, this is the story of the Bible. People didn't believe in God because of miracles either. In other words, if it's not important to you, if it doesn't resonate with you, if you don't have a way in which you could connect, the fact that somebody has some fact that you don't know just doesn't work. What we need to do is that, see, we love advocacy because there's this myth that I own a fact that you don't know. And all I need to do, it's great, if I could just find a way for you to know what I know, it's perfect. I've solved the problem. And what's even better about it is that I enter into the conversation as someone who knows, and you are an idiot. So from the beginning, it's a very I want to be an advocate. Who doesn't want to be an advocate? I know, you don't know. This is the beginning of a relationship. It's like, it's wonderful. It's exactly the way I want it to be. And then we also love, the other part of it is, we love that the only problem we face with Israel is what? Public relations. Of course, it's not policy, it's only public relations. It's only that they didn't give the right spin. It just doesn't work. If you want to speak to yourself, do it. Great. And again, there is some place, but what we really need to do in the long run is start a completely different conversation. A conversation not between those who know and the idiots of the world, because, by the way, no one wants to see them. No one's going to fall in love with Israel under the premise that they're an idiot. We need to create a conversation where the conversation itself is both a means and an end. That if you engage in the conversation, you turn around and you find yourself, I'm engaged. What does it mean to be a Jewish leader in America today? You all know. If you show up. Right? The act of showing up, when somebody comes into your door, you have them. It's not like it leads to something else. It's a life unto itself. If we could create a safe space for a conversation about, as you said, about an Israel as it ought to be, if we could create a conversation about the Israel we yearn for, if we could create a conversation about the ideas and values which Israel brings to the fore, the people who engage in that conversation will turn around. They're not just engaging in the conversation, they're engaged. And they're there. The conversation creates the reality. It creates the space. It creates the relationship. So, as I said beforehand, keep crisis alive because many people need it. Even if it's true or not true, doesn't matter. Keep it alive. Advocacy has some value. Some. I think it's limited, but it has some. Has some value. But create in your shuls another conversation. I've seen now there's over 100 synagogues across North America today who are creating this type of conversation. And people are coming to us and telling to us, for the first time we could talk about Israel again. For the first time, we haven't spoken about it in years. Because if you start a conversation, the idiots can sit with those who know, and those who know want to sit with the idiots, but want to tell them what to do. So it's not exactly a framework for a conducive relationship. Not to speak of the fact that the other conversation is between one group which says you hate, you're destroying Israel, and another group which says you're destroying Israel. We are a community who are functioning like a bunch of ultra-Orthodox Jews when it comes to Israel. We want to advocate for pluralism in Israel, but we don't advocate for pluralism in the conversation about Israel. Advocacy doesn't need that, because in advocacy, you know the truth. But the foundation of pluralism is these and these are the words of the living God. Whoa, it's a different conversation. And when you create that conversation, all of a sudden Jews who don't agree could sit and talk. And you realize that I don't have to agree with you about policy, but could I agree with you about the values that should infuse my policy? How do we think about some of the most difficult questions about Israel and then create individuals who ask ourselves, so what do I do something about it? We haven't created that space yet. We haven't. And under the guise of love and care for Israel, we are creating a community more distanced from Israel than any community in our history. And it seems as if we're doing more, but we're caring on the basis of something which at its core is either a lie or it has very limited value. Very limited value. And we rabbis are full participants in it. Full participants. We could create something else. We could go beyond advocacy. Whether we'll do so or not is a great challenge. And I can tell you, if you dare to do it, you will see something brand new happening in your community.
It's 7:30. I do want to make just one, I'm going to make a plug. You came a long way for the Engaging Israel curriculum of the Hartman Institute, which I assume you can find on the Hartman website, but it's curriculum that you can use in your congregations to begin this exact kind of conversation, and it's really terrific. Thank you both so very much.